The Sopranos is an extremely rich and nuanced TV show that essentially paved the way for television as we know it and was the pioneer for television as an artistic medium regarded at the same level as film. This being the case, I can't say anything about it that hasn't already been said. However, please allow me to express my passion for this masterpiece and discuss one of its themes that I find to be absolutely brilliant. One key feature of The Sopranos is its detailed symbolism, allowing the show to dip its toes into the realm of the slightly mystical. This is done to a perfect degree, allowing the show to still be a realistic series depicting mobsters, yet also allowing depth via the means of the subtly supernatural. There are 3 points in the show that I would like to briefly discuss that give the impression that the afterlife is somewhat present in the world of The Sopranos. In the 9th episode of Season 2, entitled From Where to Eternity, Christopher awakens in hospital shortly after being shot. He informs Tony and Paulie of one of the most creatively described ideas of hell ever, an Irish bar in which it is St. Patrick's Day every day. Chris says that he saw his late father Dickie and several other deceased associates of Tony and co. He tells Tony and Paulie that previous antagonist Mikey Palmisi told him to warn them about 3 o'clock, remember that? And that was it. It doesn't really have too much of an effect on Tony, but it spooks Paulie to the point where he goes to a seance, and the guy conducting it describes actual people that Paulie knew and killed, but that's a whole different thing.
Fucking quiz!
Paulie somehow deduces that this was in fact purgatory and not hell, and this concept lurks in the minds of the audience and characters alike for the rest of the show. A quick side note, there's also the speculation of Christopher's father Dickie implying that hell is watching yourself get whacked every night at midnight, which will also come into play later. There are several more subtly supernatural moments in the series, but the next one that I want to talk about takes place in the 2nd episode of Season 6, entitled Join the Club. This is probably my favourite episode of the show, and it's one of the biggest pieces of evidence for the existence of the afterlife in The Sopranos. This episode takes place shortly after Tony is shot by his uncle Junior, who is suffering from dementia, and takes place both in the hospital, showing Tony's physical state, but also within Tony's mind. Tony has a lot of dream sequences in the show, but in this episode there's a large narrative that alludes to the idea of the afterlife. The late great James Gandolfini drops his signature New Jersey accent and uses a voice closer to his own to present this slightly different comatose version of Tony Soprano. Allow me to get the basics out of the way. This version of Tony is not a mobster, he's a salesman, his children do not sound the same.
Hi, you reached the Sopranos. Leave a message. Bye.
He's much more shy and less frightening, and he has a briefcase and ID of a very similar looking man named Kevin Finnerty. With that being said, I'm going to call this version of Tony Kevin. Now there's a lot of narrative elements that Kevin's character goes through, including being threatened with legal action by 2 monks, falling down the stairs and being diagnosed with dementia. However, I'm going to focus on why I believe that this dream sequence is purgatory, making it an insight into the afterlife much like Christopher's dream. Bam, beacon of light in this really nicely shot scene. Heaven, boom, fires on the TV, hell, and so on and so on. This narrative spills over into the next episode and provides one of the most chilling moments in TV ever. Kevin arrives at this large manor-like building in order to return the briefcase and identification to who he believes is its rightful owner, until he sees Steve Buscemi. Whether or not this is Tony B, Buscemi's deceased character, or the gatekeeper of hell in the form of a familiar face, is up to us, I guess. I just remember that he was credited as man. This man tells Kevin that his family's waiting for him, and that he can't take his briefcase into the house even though his whole life is in there.
You can't bring business in there.
I lost my real briefcase. My whole life is in it.
He's losing his life, he's going to hell. I think so anyway. Bravo, Mr. Chase. We see the back of a Livia-esque figure wander inside, and Kevin stands there, scared of entering the other side. A squealy, childlike voice emerges from the bushes, which is revealed to be Meadow, crying for Tony to wake up, and all of a sudden he does. The way I see it, Tony narrowly avoided death here on both a physical and spiritual level, and I think he knows it, seeing as how he has a bit more of a positive outlook on life, free of sin, for a bit. The final moment in the show that I want to talk about actually happens to be the final moment in the show. The most controversial, yet in my opinion brilliant ending to a series ever. Tony enters a restaurant, and there's an abrupt cut to him sitting down, giving the impression that he's watching himself, almost like Dickie's rendition of hell was correct. Tony's clothes actually seem to change here, and this homage to the end of Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey fits the scene perfectly. Tony slaps on Journey's Don't Stop Believing, orders some onion rings and waits for his family, who enter one at a time. We see Tony's face, then we see his point of view. Carmela enters, AJ enters, and so on and so forth. A man in a members-only jacket, a reference to a previous episode, enters the bathroom in reference to The Godfather, which also places him approximately at 3 o'clock in relation to Tony. This is a very tense sequence, as the main antagonist, Phil Leotardo, was abruptly killed halfway through the episode in an anticlimactic, Sopranos-ish fashion, as opposed to shows like Breaking Bad where everything needs to fit perfectly into place. This means that we don't know what could possibly threaten Tony, but there's no way he's getting off scot-free. This makes Meadow struggling to park seem intense. Meadow finally does park, we see Tony's face, and then the song cuts off and we see a black screen. Obviously, this is a reference to Bobby's theory about death earlier on.
You probably don't even hear it when it happens, right?
However, I believe that there's too much evidence suggesting that the afterlife is real in the world of The Sopranos to ignore. One final smaller point would be the fact that Christopher actually narrated the new prequel film, The Many Saints of Newark, which I actually liked a lot more than most. We hear him narrating from beyond the grave, and he literally finishes the film by describing Tony as the man he went to hell for, a callback to when he told Adriana that Tony was the man he was going to hell for. As I said earlier, there aren't many new thoughts about The Sopranos. I just wanted to do some research on one of my all-time favourite shows and compile some thoughts. So thanks for watching, and remember, there's always room for a slice of gabagool.
Woke up this morning, got yourself a gun.